This is an experiment. Well, horse trainers are experimenting every day. Horse trainers are experimenting so much on your horses, and they are experimenting on their own horses as well. And they're so into experimentation that chances are, if you're taking a lesson with horse trainers, you're actually being experimented on as well. And you're the beneficiary. Hey guys, if we haven't met, I'm Andy Marcoux from coachmansdelight.com. I've been training horses for about 25 years with my main focus being on carriage driving. My website, coachmansdelight.com, is the place where I share all of my experience through blog posts and lesson plans and articles and online classes. Now, if you're here with me and you are somebody who's taken some online classes, do me a favor, hit the like or the heart button or something like that. I don't exactly know, because the Facebook Live is an experiment thing for me, but let other people know that you take part in the classes and what you think of those classes. All right, so let's get back to the whole experimentation thing. Tell me if you've had this experience. I know that you probably have. Maybe you're at a horse show or a clinic or something like that, and you see a trainer working with a student, and things are kind of going along okay, but they're not that great. And the trainer eventually says, you know what, can I get those reins for a minute? I got something I want to try. Right? The trainer picks up the reins and things are fine. Things are going along the way the horse has been going through the whole lesson or the work session or whatever. But then you start to think you see a little bit of an improvement, and maybe a couple minutes into it, maybe 5 minutes into it, 10 minutes later, all of a sudden the pony, he's going like ambrosia. He is so beautiful and nice and round and expressive, and everything just seems to fall together for that pony who, when he came off the trailer, kind of looked like a two-bit nag, right? Let me know if you've had that experience. Maybe you've had that experience even with your own horse, where you get a trainer out there driving your horse or riding your horse, and all of a sudden, man, you didn't even know that horse existed in there. Well, that all came to be through experimentation. Now, any good experiment has kind of the same 5 or 6 things in common. So a good experiment starts with good research and observation. That's where it all begins. And then you form a hypothesis based on that research and observation. And then you get into the testing phase. And that's where you really put that hypothesis to the test. You're trying to prove or disprove the hypothesis, right? And once you've done that a little bit, then you get into your analysis phase of the experiment, and then finally you come to a conclusion. This worked, this didn't work, this is why, this is where we go from here. So how does that all happen? You're thinking to yourself right now, well, geez, we're talking about watching a trainer work for a horse for 5 or 10 minutes. How did that trainer get all of that stuff done in 10 minutes? Well, I got news for you. That trainer got all of that stuff done. They probably ran 3 or 4 experiments in that 10-minute period. And it starts out with that research and observation phase of the experiment. So this is where you're just taking in all the details. You're just watching the horse. Now, when did that trainer start the research and observation phase? Probably from when the trainer first laid eyes on that horse that day. I can tell you, when I'm out doing clinics and I'm teaching and there are other horses working in the area, other horses, maybe I'm not even going to be giving them a lesson, but I see what's going on. I see that relationship between the driver and the horse, or the rider and the horse. I see how that horse is moving. I see how that person is handling the horse, and it all filters into the brain. In fact, I can't really help it. I mean, that's part of being a horse trainer. It's almost involuntary. I can be sitting there eating lunch, having a perfectly normal conversation about horses or not horses or anything like that. And if I see you across the field, yeah, it's all entering. So that's all part of that research and observation. And of course, that continues. It gets more intense when a lesson starts and we're working together and I'm watching things happen and giving suggestions. And so that's part of the observation. But that research and observation phase, most importantly, continues once I get on the carriage, once I start driving, or once the trainer starts riding that horse that we're thinking about, that they're experimenting on. You know, you don't get on a horse and immediately throw a whole bunch of changes at it. You've got to get started, you get moving, you do some observations, you feel what that horse is giving you for feedback. Because there are a lot of times you're watching a lesson and you're getting feedback from the student, but really the true feedback comes when you get those reins in your hands and you start feeling what that horse is giving for feedback. It's not only what I'm getting through the reins, but it's how the horse is moving, the momentum that I feel from the horse, whether I'm driving or riding or even long lining. And all of this is an effort to find out what's happening, what is happening. Not what do I not want to happen. It isn't what do I want to happen. Right there in that research observation mode, you're all about gaining information about what is actually going on at the moment without trying to change it. You're just trying to, you know, absorb information. Now, I mean, raise your hand or throw a little emoji out if you've ever been in a situation where you've said, I don't care why it's happening, I just want my horse to stop whatever it is, blank, right? Or I just want him to do this. And that's your entire focus when you're driving sometimes. Man, I just want him to stop throwing his head up when we go through transitions. Or, gosh, I just want him to reach more forward when I'm asking for a lengthening. I mean, have you ever had that experience? You know, let me know in the comments. What's happening in the moment is really important, and you have to focus on that instead of what you want the horse to do when you're in that research and observation mode. Now, when you start deciding what you want the horse to do differently is when you get into that hypothesis mode. So what may make this horse change? So in the example of a horse kind of throwing his head up in transitions or going into turns or something like that, what are the things that you could do to change that horse's behavior? You know, could I introduce a little bit more contact? Could I relax with my contact more? You know, what are the ideas that you have? And you run through these different ideas and you know, go through the observations that you made. You know, well, maybe the trainer felt like the horse was losing contact and therefore losing connection in that moment between, you know, the walk and the trot, or the trot and the walk, or going into a turn. So maybe the trainer might come to the hypothesis that, you know what, I feel like if I give this pony just a little bit more contact and maybe a more consistent outside rein, maybe that will help. So there we are. We've got a hypothesis, we've done our observations, and now it's time to get into testing. Now, this is the give it a try portion of the experiment, right? And if you know anything about experimentation and scientific experiments of any kind, what do we try to do with experiments? We try to limit the variations. And we all know with horses, man, they're throwing a lot of variations at us all the time, every minute of every day. And so what can we do to limit those variations? Well, this is one of the reasons that we horse trainers love to work in a ring, because it starts to limit the variations. I mean, think about it. If we're out working in the field and over roads and tracks, Well, the terrain is changing, the scenery is changing, there could be traffic, there could be other horses coming and going, and so we're getting a lot of variations, environmental variation. When we bring the horse into a work area, a defined space, even if it's in just a defined space in a big giant field, really just setting out some cones and saying, okay, Ponyface, in this defined area is where we're going to work, and we're going to keep our work. Well, then you get to limit the variations in the footing. And yeah, sure, there's variation within the arena, but it's repeating variation, right? So if you have a horse who works better kind of at the north end of the arena than the south end of the arena, okay, sure, there's that variation, but it's a consistent variation, right? So we can kind of plan for that. So, you know, the reason we like that is not, you know, because we want to see who can make the prettiest figures. We're not always working in rings because we want to make circles that are more perfect circles than the last almost perfect circle. It's because we're creating these repeatable patterns where we can limit the variations in our experimentations. That's what makes lesson plans so powerful. That's why I've gotten into this thing about lesson plans, is because figures and lesson plans make a repeatable, predictable, trainable pattern that you can really do some high quality testing with your horse on. All right, so once we've eliminated as many of those variables as we can, we'll go ahead and start testing our hypothesis. All right, so what did we say our trainer's hypothesis was? It was, hey, we're going to introduce a little bit more contact, maybe a little more steady, firm outside rein. Okay, cool. So let's say we go into that corner that the horse is, you know, throwing his head, and maybe through that transition that he's hiking up in, and we introduce that little bit of extra contact and that more consistent outside rein, and the horse goes beautifully. Wahoo, right? That's awesome. You know what that proves? Absolutely nothing. Just doing it once doesn't prove anything. Come on, a great experiment means that you have to make it what? Repeatable. Okay, it doesn't prove anything if I got your horse to go really nice through that corner or through that transition just once, because I have to be able to hand that horse back to you and make it so that you can do it, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to go and I'm going to repeat the experiment. I'm going to repeat that testing phase. And so if I keep testing and it keeps going well, all right, boom, we're right there, and that's awesome, and that's super successful. More times than not, it's not going to be super consistent though, is it? I mean, they're ponies, right? And they're going to throw their own variations at us, and we're going to have our own variations as well. We're, you know, maybe we're going to get our timing better on this one, and maybe we're a little bit late on the next one, and you know, maybe this one we were a little too strong with the reins, right? So we're going to go back and we're going to keep repeating that test, and maybe things are going to get a little bit ugly for a little while. Maybe it's not going to work for a little while, and we refine our technique, we refine our movement, just focusing in on that one piece that we're testing on, right? And that's great, and it starts to come together. Now, it doesn't always just come together like that. I mean, tell me if you've had this experience. Maybe you've even had this experience with me, where I give you a really great exercise, and when I'm there giving you a lesson, oh man, we had it coming together really nicely, especially by the end of the lesson. And you bring that exercise home, and you bring that lesson home, and you can't get it quite right, and you can't figure out what you were doing right. But then you keep working at it, and maybe over a couple of sessions, you start to fall together, and it becomes your go-to tool. I can think of so many examples in which I've had that. Certainly with the outside rein, yeah, that was something that took me years to develop. So it doesn't always go right away, but it's something that you can develop through refinement. So tell me in the comments section if you can think of a tool that a trainer has given you that you've tried and worked at a clinic, but then it didn't work for a while, but then you worked at it and you built it into a tool that maybe now is like one of your go-to techniques, right? Just put it there in the comment section. Let everybody else kind of share, and let's see what pops up over there. Now, what if the opposite is true? We had this hypothesis. We had, we're going to pick up some more contact and a little more consistent outside rain. And so we go through that transition or that corner, and the pony throws his head a little bit more. Oh my God, he really throws his head and maybe flags his tail a little bit. Well, that's awful. That's a terrible result, right? Do we go back and do it again? Well, think about it. Do we go back? Yeah, of course we go back, because we went back when it went perfectly, didn't we? We got it to go perfectly, and then we had to prove that it goes perfectly, right? So it went really, really bad. But we have to make sure that that wasn't just because the horse had a little bit of a misstep. Maybe he hit a piece of bad footing. Maybe you were just a little bit rough with the reins, right? So you're going to go back and try it again. And then maybe it switches back over to the positive side. Or maybe it gets worse. Maybe, the first time through, he throws his head a little bit and maybe a little flag of the tail. The second time through, he really objects and he throws his head a little bit and he flags his tail and he really stiffens up in his back and he says, hey. Third time through, now the pony is starting to, get a little stressed, and he's, saying, man. And as you're approaching the exercise, he starts to object. Wow. So clearly, in that case, picking up a little extra bit of contact and that extra outside rein and more consistent on that outside rein was definitely not the right thing to do. So was that experiment a failure or a success? In my book, that experiment was still a success, because I got a really valuable piece of information from that. I got, geez, when I picked up the reins on this pony, I kind of thought to myself, oh yeah, I think a little more contact and a more consistent outside rein is really going to fix this pony's world. And I found out that I was dead wrong. Clearly, this is 180 degrees from where I want to be with this pony. This is the absolute wrong technique. That's awesome. That's like flipping the radio dial and figuring out, oh no, this was balanced. The speakers went left to right when I was looking for volume. Cool. I know that I'm working with the wrong tool. And when I know it's so clearly like that, man, that extra contact, that extra outside rein is absolutely the wrong thing. Now I can say, gee, I thought it was because he was losing connection. But now I can say to myself, gosh, what's the opposite of that? Relaxing the rein. Softening the reins. So maybe now I develop a new hypothesis. My new hypothesis is, all right, so what happens if I just ease his tempo a little bit, slow things down, try to get his breathing and his heart rate down? And what if I just, as I'm approaching that transition, maybe soften on the reins, maybe relax to them and let those reins out, even give a little activation on that outside rein to encourage him to follow that rein forward, to kind of follow that bit down. That sounds like the opposite to the first technique that I was talking about, right? So now, look, all of a sudden, I've still fallen upon what works by finding out what doesn't work. So even when I do an experiment that I get what we would kind of classify as a negative result, it's still a really successful experiment. So, when we get done with that, now we can kind of do the analysis. We can say, hey, let's check this out. Why did that work? Oh, it wasn't because he was losing contact. It was because he wasn't relaxed enough. There wasn't enough elasticity. There wasn't enough throughness. There wasn't enough connection. We needed to let him stretch. All right, there's the analysis. Come to the conclusion. Conclusion is this pony needs to stretch and that pony needs more contact. Cool. Now it's my job to get that technique over to the driver who belongs to the horse, right? So the whole experimentation thing, man, that can happen within 2 or 3 minutes at a time. Everybody sees me drive a horse, and when they see that whole thing go together, they're like, oh man, it's just because he just knows what he's doing. Yeah, I don't know that much. I mean, yes, I do have lots and lots of experience, and I can bring that experience to the technique and the experimentation and developing my hypothesis, but really I'm just doing more experiments than most other people, and that's why I'm getting those successes. Now, the cool thing is experimentation is not just something that belongs to horse trainers. It's something that you absolutely can do with your horses as well. And what I will say is all it takes to get yourself into this experimentation mode with your horse when you're out there driving him next is take a little bit of a step back. You know, we're all focused on being in the moment and riding in the moment, or, you know, just living in the moment, and that's awesome. And living in the moment is definitely super cool. And driving in the moment is great, unless you want to get better. If you want to get better, you're going to have to be able to be in 3 moments at the same time. You need to be in the moment of what is happening. Yes, that's in the moment, but you also need to be aware of what led to what is happening. And then you need to be taking proaction on what you want to happen next. You need to be driving for the next moment. So you really sort of have to be in 3 places at once. And the place to start to develop that skill is by getting quiet. You need the skill of stillness. Okay, the skillness of stillness. I'm going to trademark that, I think, right? You need to build the skill of still so that you can get into that observation research mode. Now, if you're a regular reader on my blog, you might remember a post back from a little while ago called Finding Stillness. If you didn't read that blog, you know, go ahead and check it out on the website, because I give you some really good advice on how to actually intentionally make that still moment. And it basically just goes a little bit like this. It's if you're going to do a transition over there at A, well, we know that the transition has 3 parts, right? There's the preparation phase, the execution phase, and the follow through. So pony, I'm gonna, and walk, and continue to walk, right? So now I'm going to add a 4th phase to that transition. I'm going to add the 1, 2, I'm gonna. So you're going to plan your transition with a moment of stillness. Now you can do this even without doing transitions. You can just decide at 4 places in the arena, hey, I'm going to be still for 2 seconds there. I'm just going to stop driving and I'm going to listen. And you know, that's when you can evaluate your contact, evaluate your horse's rhythm and relaxation and connection. That's when you can kind of observe all that stuff. And then you can develop your hypothesis. When you've developed a hypothesis, what I want you to do is focus in on one thing only. So that might be, hey, will more contact improve this? Or would a driving aid right there, a nice little right there, improve things? What's the one thing that I could do? And then you go ahead and, of course, repeat that, you know, and you keep repeating that testing phase until you can come to, you know, some sort of an analysis and conclusion. Yeah, that worked really well. Or, gee, that didn't do anything. Maybe I should do it more, or maybe I should change tact. You know, another blog that I just recently shared that's really great for this experimentation and finding stillness thing is the one that, gosh, what was it called? It was the Beyond Theory blog. Now that was a lot about the training scale, or the prism. I'm going to call it the training prism from now on, because I think it's a better description of how the training scale really works with horses. But at the bottom of that blog, I gave you this really cool metronome exercise. So you're just kind of download an app to your phone with a metronome on it, so that your phone, doot, 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 and you're going to try to get your pony's rhythm to match that metronome. First, you got to get the metronome to kind of match your pony's rhythm more or less, but then you want to try to get your pony being consistent with that. And that's really great because it takes that finding stillness and then the experiment. Is it half halts that I need to help him match that rhythm? Is it driving aids that I need to help him match that rhythm? I will tell you, it's a little bit of a frustrating exercise at first, but it's totally cool when you work with it a bunch and you really find that rhythm. All right, so here's the interactive part that I want some feedback from you. Tell me in the comment section below what that one thing is that you're working on with your pony that you'd like to improve. And what are the things that you think you could do to experiment with that? Okay, so you get points for telling me what it is that you're working on. You get bonus points if you suggest a way that you're going to go about working on it. And the cool thing is that I can, reply to the comments, even when this live broadcast is over, because I'm pretty sure they get saved over there in the comment section. And I guess that's it. Basically, my advice to you is choose a lesson plan that you and your pony are really good at, really consistent at, something that you know really well. That lesson plan that you've done week after week, month after month. Now, if you're somebody who hasn't driven lesson plans, man, I cannot recommend it highly enough. And if you don't have a lesson plan really available, I know where you can get one. If you go over to my website, I've got, probably a dozen or 24 lesson plans. And they're lesson plans like developing the walk or building the half halt that lend themselves really well to this whole experimentation thing. And give that a try. Get familiar with the lesson plan first, and then decide one thing that you want to experiment with on that lesson plan and go out and try it. We can continue the conversation more in the comments section. I'll also post this on my website at Coachman's Delight, so you can comment in the comment section on the website. And as always, there's always the Ask Andy section of my website. And I love it when people ask questions in there because it's a great way for us to have a conversation, but it's a great way for us to learn from each other. When I answer your question, other people get the same answers and they get to apply it to their horses. All right, I really hope that you enjoyed this little experiment on experimentation. If you did, please hit that like button and please share this with your friends, with your driving clubs, especially let the driving clubs know that this was on here. We'll leave this video up for everybody else to be able to look at later. And that's it. I hope you guys are having a fabulous new year. We're only 3 days into it and we're already getting really good stuff done. If the weather's great where you are, get out there and drive your pony. And if it's not great, well, put on more clothes and go out and drive your pony anyway. All right, thank you very much for joining me. You have a great rest of your day. Take care.